Welcome to Airgun Extra, brought to you in association with Crackshot, the Southwest's premier airgun centre and ranges. In this week's episode, I'm taking a look at the carbine version of the awesome value Reximex Pretensis. Before that though, I'm heading out on a squirrel shoot, which shapes up a bit differently from what I'd initially planned. Right, well, as you can see, we're in the woods, and it's going to be a slightly different shoot from what I was initially expecting it to be. So, about a week ago, I had a call from the gamekeeper here who explained to me that he'd left 2 pheasant feeders running longer and later than usual because he had some wheat to use up. And he said one of them was getting absolutely hammered by grey squirrels. Could I give it some attention and thin them out? So, I came the following day, but what had obviously happened was the keeper hadn't checked that feeder for a while, and it had actually run empty, maybe for just a day or two, and frustrated squirrels had chewed it to pieces. There was a big hole in there, no wheat left. So I've told the keeper, but I saw no point in waiting for him to replace that feeder, because at this time of year he may not even bother until the birds are out in the release pens. So what I decided to do was put up a peanut feeder of my own. Now, in normal circumstances, I'd give that feeder a couple of weeks to let the squirrels build up, but I came back after a couple of days and it was almost empty, so there are definitely still plenty of squirrels around. I topped it up, we're back again a couple of days on, so hopefully we will encounter a few squirrels. I'm going to get myself settled in and we'll see how it goes. That's a great start. Didn't have to wait too long for that one. Although I did have to be a little bit patient with the shot, because the squirrel initially just held there with its head behind the front of the feed tray. So I just waited until it settled on top of the feeder, offering me a nice clear shot. And another one. Now, it may well have been the keeper's wheat which was initially drawing the squirrels here, but it certainly hasn't taken them long to turn over to the peanuts. It's also a really good illustration, I think, of the significance of using feeders to draw squirrels away from cover when you're shooting them, because at this time of year there is so much foliage up in the canopy that I would certainly struggle to shoot them up in the treetops now. That squirrel did an interesting little twirl around the branch that I've got propped up by the feeder before it settled to feed. Now, the feeder is just this side of my zero range, so I'm giving shots just a little bit of hold under, but it is just a tiny bit, and as I hope you can see, this setup is absolutely pinpoint. And another one. I've got to say that, you know, although I knew the peanuts were going down quickly, it is always a relief to see that it is grey squirrels that are taking them when you've set up a feeder like this, because particularly with this feeder I know I'm going to be losing a few to birds because it's one of my old homemade feeders and it hasn't got a lid over the feed tray. And in fact we have actually seen a few jays visiting here today. We leave them alone on this estate because there aren't that many of them here. They don't want them shot, but yeah, at least we're seeing a few squirrels. The squirrels really can't resist this feeder. It actually looked a little bit darker through the scope cam then, just because the feeder is in full shade, but we have actually got a couple of hours of decent light left. But frustratingly, we are going to have to wrap it up here because I've just had a text to say that they're going to be firing up the chainsaw soon to take down a tree just across the way. Now, it's not so close as to be dangerous, but the noise certainly isn't going to do us any favours. But we've had a reasonable number of squirrels and I will most certainly be back again. And before we do head off, I will just head down to the homemade feeder to give you a look at that, and hopefully we'll have time to do that before the noise of the chainsaws kicks in. Right, well, the sun's trying to come back out, but look, before we head off, as I said, we will just have a quick look at my homemade squirrel feeder. It's very old, just in case you fancy making one perhaps for a weekend project of your own. As you know, I'm a big fan of the metal ones made by Keith's High Seats. All of my ones of those are out on other jobs at the moment. This one, as I explained at the start, had to be grabbed quite hastily. But it does the job, and that's the important thing. So yeah, the design of it basically is very similar to a bird box. So it's a wooden box, a lid on top that I can open and close to load it up with peanuts, an outlet hole at the front, and a tray into which the peanuts spill through gravity. And that's obviously where they sit for the squirrels to come and take them. Things to consider if you do make your own feeder: make sure that the lid overlaps enough that you're not getting water going in there and rotting your peanuts. You also need a means of attaching it, whether that be rope or nails, and if you're going to nail it to a tree, do check with the landowner first, and also make sure you remove the nails when you finish, because the last thing you want is somebody with a chainsaw encountering them. It's also very important to consider that your feeder's got a decent capacity. I think this one holds about 9 pints of peanuts. That's generally sufficient to not having to be constantly running back and forth to keep it topped up. Also, I've cut some tin with an angle grinder and screwed plates to the front of this feeder for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's protecting it from pellets, but more significantly, it's giving it some protection from chewing by frustrated peanuts. If you let your feeder run empty, which you really should try not to do, they get frustrated and they will chew a feeder to pieces. There are areas on this one, like I said, it's a few years old. I'm constantly patching it up. It's still just about going. Like I said, metal ones, shop bought ones, they're expensive, but they're worth the money. If you're on a tight budget, do give one like this a try, rustle it up yourself. Right then, so we've managed to beat the noise of the chainsaws. I will leave you with a quick roundup of the kit that I've been using today that we shot before we got started. So the gun is the Daystate Huntsman Revere Safari Edition. You'll know that I use this gun a lot. I've actually got two of them, one in 177 caliber, one in 22, both sub 12. This is the 177, and yeah, it's just a really nice, accurate, multi-shot PCP, lovely looking gun too. I have paired it with JTS dead center pellets. Being 177 caliber, I'm using the 10.4 grain version. This gun is really, really accurate with them. Optics wise, I've got the MTC King Cobra, a really nice, bright, versatile scope. As I always say, when the scope cam's on here, that does compromise image quality a little bit, so bear in mind that without that scope cam on, it will be much sharper and much brighter. As ever, I've got the scope held on with Sports Match scope mounts. I've been using them for decades and I've got absolute faith in them. You know, they're super secure, they've never let me down. And the other thing I've got is the Eagle Vision Cam Helia moderator. Again, I'm a big fan of these. Got them on several of my guns now. They're nice looking little mods, but most importantly, they keep the muzzle report nice and quiet. So that's the main items of kit, and hopefully you've just seen me putting them to very good use. Don't forget to give us a follow on the Airgun Extra Facebook page. Apart from us using it to keep you up to date with everything we're up to, it's also a great way for you to send us questions for the Airgun Extra podcast. Plus, there may even be a couple of competitions in the pipeline. Right then, so next up, we've got the Reximex Pretensis K. Right then, what I have here is the Reximex Pretensis K, which is a shorter carbine version. Now, I've been shooting the standard Pretensis for quite a while now, and it is a really good airgun for the money. Now, this one is distributed in the UK by Range Right and has a recommended retail price of £615. And if it's as good as the original, that will represent extremely good value for money. So let's find out. Like my Pretensis, this one feels nice and robust. The finish is tidy and it's a good looking airgun. Now it's 870mm long from muzzle to butt, so it's fairly compact, and on my scales it's weighing just a shade over 3 kilos. It's well balanced, manageable and feels good in the shoulder. This airgun's good looks are enhanced by its Turkish walnut stock, which is a nice bit of timber. I like the long fore end and the grooves that run along the front section of it, which really do help to improve hold. Now, the stock is fitted with front and rear studs, which you could use for either sling or bipod attachment, and it also comes supplied with a removable front Picatinny accessory rail, which I've got fitted here. Moving back along the Ambidextrous stock, you've got some nice fore end stippling on both sides, although being so far back, I would imagine that most shooters are going to find that it's more for aesthetics than actual function. Now, there are panels of that same stylized stippling on both sides of the pistol grip, and that is a nice steep grip. It delivers good trigger attack and a comfortable hold, whether you want to shoot thumb up or thumb around. One of the features that I really like about this stock is its height adjustable cheekpiece. You just slacken off the locking screws and then it slides up and down, so you can get it into exactly the right position to give you good eye alignment with your chosen scope. Now the gun actually comes supplied with the Allen key that you need to do that, along with a load of other useful tools. The stock is then finished with a very grippy, hard rubber pad, and you can see you've also got that factory fitted rear stud there too. Moving on to the metalwork, the Pretensis K has a 420mm barrel. This one is 2.2 caliber, though it's also available in 177 and .25. The barrel is finished with a 1/2 inch UNF thread for silencer attachment, and as is usually the case, I would imagine that most hunters will want to go ahead and fit one because it does have a bit of a bark to it without. The Pretensis has the Reximex dual mounting system, and that means you can use either Picatinny or dovetail mounts to attach your scope. Now the rail is actually in 2 sections, straddling the magazine, and they give you a total clamping space of about 150mm. Now you can actually see that I have only had to use the rear section to mount the little Kona scope that I've got on here. The Pretensis K runs the usual magazine, which will be familiar to a lot of Reximex owners. Now it also comes supplied with a single shot loader, which is really handy. So this magazine holds 12 shots in 2.2 caliber and 14 in 177. It's simple to load, kind to pellets, and even incorporates a counter so you can keep an eye on how many rounds you have left in there. The cocking and loading cycle is taken care of by a very positive side lever action. Now as a right-hander, I found the lever to be really conveniently positioned, although it can't be reversed for left-handers. In operation, it worked absolutely brilliantly during my weeks of testing, keeping the shots coming one after another without any hitches at all. The trigger on the Pretensis K is surprisingly good given its price point. Now I really like the wide match type blade, which is adjustable for height and angle. Now the trigger release is also adjustable, but as ever, I've tested it on its factory setting because I think triggers should be good to go straight out of the box. So on this one, first stage is quite light and pretty short, but it comes to a very clear stop before a crisp, predictable second stage break. You've got a crossbolt type safety catch conveniently positioned just above the trigger blade. Now it does make a bit of a click when you operate it, but you can silence it by applying a little bit of pressure on the opposite side when you push it across. So you push it across from the left to put it into the safe position, and then flick it back across from the right when you're ready to take the shot. The Pretensis K is regulated, and on this one, that regulator is keeping shot-to-shot consistency within 12 feet per second over a 10-shot string. You can see the regulator gauge just next to the power adjustment dial. Now that little lever has 9 stop points. Wind it all the way down and it reduces power by about 1/3, or you can use those smaller increments to tweak muzzle velocity and maybe even tighten up your grouping. On full output, the 2.2 caliber test gun is running at about 11.4 foot-pounds. Now onboard pressure is displayed on the gauge at the front of the cylinder, and you can expect 80 or so shots from a full 250 bar fill. Now when it's time to refill, you simply slide the collar at the front of the cylinder forward to expose the inlet and then plug in the supplied probe. Now I was initially a little bit concerned that I might not be able to remove that collar with a silencer fitted, but thankfully you can get it far enough forward to expose that inlet before it reaches the silencer thread. When it comes to accuracy, the Pretensis K is pretty impressive. Now, it really is unfair to expect match-winning precision from an airgun costing around £600, but this one is pretty close to it, and it's certainly up to pest control over typical sub-12 ranges. Off of the bench, it's comfortably churning out ragged single-hole groups at 30 metres, and it's still generally grouping within 20mm from centre to centre at 40 metres. So there you have the Reximex Pretensis K, and I really like it. It's a no-nonsense, sensibly priced, good-looking airgun that puts pellets in the right place. Add a few nice touches like that decent trigger, spare magazine, single shot loader and the adjustable cheekpiece, and I think it represents remarkably good value for money.
The Great British Shooting Show hits the NEC Birmingham from the 12th to the 14th of February 2027, the UK's biggest and best shooting event. Buy tickets online today.
I'm afraid that's all we have time for this week, but there is loads more coming very soon. Thanks again to Crackshot. There's a link to their website in the show description, and thank you for tuning in. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. As I've said, there's lots more to come. Until then, enjoy your shooting and stay safe.